So today we do have an exclusive with Josh because Ampersand had previously raised about $15 million, and right now they're about to announce a $20 million fundraise. How did that happen, and how are you feeling about it?
Oh, it was most of my time has been focused on fundraising for the past year, 18 months. We had a term sheet from an investor, and they pulled it away right away. This is just as cases we're picking up in California. So we'll say on average, a Kigali motorbike driver about $700 a year, right, which is life-changing.
Yeah.
First, we are competing a bit on an unlevel playing field, but I think we've shown that it's worth taking a look towards Africa.
What's up, everybody? We are here once again in Nairobi, Kenya, and today I'm super excited because we have the founder and CEO of Ampersand, Josh Will, all the way originally from New Zealand to coming to many different places around the world. He also speaks Chinese, which we're going to learn about today. And my Chinese sucks, so I'm not even going to try to compete at all. But he's also been around the world, lived in many different places. Starting off Ampersand in Rwanda, now operating in Kenya as well, and we're going to learn about that journey, and maybe recently announcing a new fundraise. So we'll learn about that in this episode. So stay tuned. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Benji.
Yeah,
great to be here.
Super excited to have you on. I actually took my first Ampersand ride a few days ago in Kigali. It was this. We'll put the B-roll where you can see this motorcycle. So this guy called Felix came and picked me up. I don't know, was that a bull?
It varies, it goes. I think the latest incarnation is we had a red one which was kind of Elmo.
Okay.
And then I think it's back to sort of a gorilla. It started out as a cat.
Oh wow.
So all very fur themed creations.
Yeah, and then so it was just you can see it in the videos. I get on this motorcycle and I ride to. I was actually going to a meeting at the central bank, and the pull took me there. So it was a fun pulling up there, and we're like, "Oh, what are you doing? What is that?" And you get some fun faces of people looking at you, turning their heads to look at. So it's a really cool bike. But they build. They sell bikes across Eastern Africa. Electric bikes where people have these batteries, and then they service the batteries, and people go and swap them out over and over again. And I shouldn't talk about the pitch. I'll allow Josh to tell you in one sentence what they do. So,
no, that's about right. I think what people see is the motorcycles, right? And I think for a long time, and even in the beginning, we thought of ourselves as an electric motorcycle company. But the truth is that we're really in the energy business. That's true from both a revenues perspective. We've just passed our first quarter where our revenues from battery swapping and providing this energy to bodaboda riders, so motorbike taxi riders in Rwanda and Kenya. That energy piece is actually the bigger piece. And when we when we really look at the technology and the state of where it is, I think that's also where we add the most value. So we've spent a lot of time and effort developing and building a battery pack ourselves. We're the only company that does that at least at any sort of scale in East Africa. And we actually build the packs in Rwanda. And the reason that we went to all that trouble is that there was nothing available on the market that you could just go, usually to China. We couldn't just go to China and buy something that was cheaper and more reliable per kilometer.
Yeah.
And so over the past 7 years, we've developed successive generations of these battery packs that are now 6 months. They'll go without any issues, and then when there is an issue, we send someone out and they switch the battery out on the side of the road. So it's more reliable than the reliability of an internal combustion engine.
Wow.
And certainly compared to anything else that's available out there in the market. Wow. And then on top of that, we've got a software layer. So you met our CTO Alp just last week.
Yeah.
So he and his team have really developed this whole, just for our own internal purposes, software system that manages all the payments. It manages this fleet of batteries in real time, actually starting to now anticipate demand across the network so we can adjust the charging speed and pricing in real time. Because really those batteries, that fleet of batteries is our biggest asset. It's not the motorcycles we sell through a lot of partners. It's not the physical charging infrastructure. So yeah, that software layer is really key, and it's not only just has a massive benefit for us. Just that optimization reduces our capex enormously, and prolongs the lifespan of the batteries enormously, and it promotes reliability and handles all the payments for batteries. But it's also something that now actually folks outside of Africa are taking an interest in for battery fleets in South America and India.
Yeah. And so let's take a step back. I want to learn about this journey from New Zealand. Talk to me about New Zealand and like how your journey like began from there towards the African continent.
Yeah, so I guess I was you grew up a lot in and around nature. We had a little boat. We would go out in the sea a lot. In New Zealand, you're very close to nature as well. Yeah. Interest in hiking. I grew up with National Geographic magazines on the bookshelf and nature documentaries, and so I think very sort of attuned to
not rugby, not
the natural world. Oh, that was there too, but rugby is less related to climate change.
A bit tough on the World Cup this year, but we'll let that one slide.
Yeah, it's good to pass it around. Like, it's good if we just dominate all the time.
You can't keep winning all the time, right? Yeah. I have to give South Africa something this year.
Exactly, it's good for the game. Good for the game. So anyway, I think that's definitely that awareness is where that came from. And my wife, who we met way back in university, also similar background. And just as we were both coming out of university, we saw the Al Gore movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and that's kind of where everything just kind of clicked into place. And I've actually heard around it. I was at the COP28 this past week, and heard from a few people the same story. So a lot of people who work in climate now actually started or started to turn their careers and their lives towards that mission way back. I think it was about 2004, 2005. The first movie came out. And so that's really set us on a track. And at the time I'd been studying law, politics, and Chinese. And
why Chinese, like out of anywhere?
Just randomly at university. It's just sort of one of those things that I was taking an international business course, and you had to take a language. And I already spoke German because my mum's German. And I thought, well, let's pick one of the riskier, more interesting ones and have a crack at it. And it stuck.
Wait, du kannst auf Deutsch sprechen?
Ja.
Ich habe 10 Jahre auf Deutsch gelernt.
Oh, natürlich.
Es gibt viele deutsche Leute in Tansania.
Ja, natürlich.
Also meine Schüler, wir haben 10 Jahre auf Deutsch gelernt, aber heute mein Deutsch ist nicht so gut. Wow, ist cool.
Ich wusste gar nicht, dass man das immer noch auf der Schule in Tansania lernt.
Aber ich kann nicht verstanden viele Deutsch. So, yeah. You can clearly tell my German sucks, but I did learn German for 10 years. Oh, that's cool. So English, German, Chinese, what else?
No, that's it. That's it.
Cool. I was about to say Swahili, maybe.
We're working on it.
Okay. Do you have a Kenyan name yet, or
no?
A Rwandan name?
No, I've attempted some attempts at Duolingo, about as far as I've got so far, unfortunately.
Nice. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You tell me about your journey, and then
no worries.
German,
yeah. So I had studied Chinese already, and then it was so clear, and actually in the Inconvenient Truth movie, that China was on track at that time to becoming the world's biggest emitter. And so naively, we were like, okay, we should go to China and see if there's something we can do and be useful. And this climate change thing, and obviously it's completely naive. Except that my wife actually had a relevant degree and got an internship with the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is a legal U.S. environmental law NGO. And so she actually managed to start on a track, completely unpaid, as it was back then. Unpaid internships were the thing. It took me a bit longer to actually start working on climate change. I ended up taking a job as an intellectual property lawyer in China, so using my law degree so that we could pay off our student loans and put food on the table while Claire worked up. And what actually evolved was kind of a grand bargain between us. So while Claire was working in these unpaid jobs and actually building up enough of a resume and experience that and then ultimately going off to get a master's to the point where she could actually make a living off of working on climate change. In the meantime, I worked as an intellectual property lawyer and paid the bills, and then got to a point where we could then switch over. So within about 3 months of Claire getting a master's and getting a paying job working on climate, I left my job started on this journey.
So was that the part on LinkedIn I saw? It said like took a sabbatical, like that was called Radical.
Yeah. There was actually an idea I got from someone else. I think it was a book someone showed me at the time. So this idea was like, if you're in a career and you're not sure what to do, I think some high performing McKinsey person, of course, like developed a whole like
thesis, a framework,
a framework for picking their next career. And I think I'm paraphrasing, so definitely look up Radical Sabbatical if you're interested. But basically, she did a big mind map of all the things she was interested in, and kind of scribbled them on a board, and then went out and bought people coffee and just begged, borrowed, and harassed to ask people. And then went and then narrative funnel down to a few different options, and then went and did like sort of volunteered for like 2 weeks in these different roles. And I think she ended up becoming a zookeeper because she loved animals and that's what she had the most fun at.
Wow.
So it was quite a drastic career transition, but it was very methodical and, went and tested and did herself as the user testing.
Wow.
Around it.
So for you,
for me, it was a bit different.
Yeah.
So the way I approached it was, wanted to draw a really big line between the two and get back into shape, and which I'm not anymore. But
none of us are, don't worry.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, so I went and did a lot of walking. I walked the Camino de Santiago. I walked the John Muir Trail in California with a friend. I went off to Nepal, did the Annapurna Sanctuary Trek, went on a 9-day meditation retreat. So I did a lot of walking and kind of thinking and drawing lines. But what actually, a theme kind of emerged, which was everywhere I went, the climate was changing. It was like, it was definitely like making sure I was sticking on that path and not going off and doing something random. It was went to California, there were massive wildfires that year. Went to China, there was a huge drought. Went to Nepal, all the glaciers were melting. Went on the silent meditation retreat in Sri Lanka, but the rainy season had arrived 2 weeks early, so everything was covered in leeches. And that was like my first like real silent meditation thing. So I think having a giant leech like crawl towards you is pretty advanced. Next level mindfulness to like block that out. So that was kind of funny. But interspersed with this, I went back to China and actually studied a bit of Chinese again. And then went around, visited some factories for electric scooters and e-bikes, because the original concept for Ampersand came about around 2009. I was living in China. The Roadster came out from Tesla, and suddenly everyone was like, okay, everyone had a big paradigm shift around electric vehicles. Until then, if you will cast your mind back, electric cars were
these boxy, like old school, not fancy looking.
Like the first Prius, that was just a hybrid, and then you've got the Nissan Leaf, the first Nissan Leaf at the time. That was about as good as it got.
Yeah.
And then suddenly George Clooney is driving around in this retrofitted Lotus Elise thing that just tears around and has an incredible acceleration, and like boom, okay. So that was a bit of a light bulb. But I was thinking about this, and I look around me in China, and there were already 200 million electric scooters and e-bikes on the road.
Wow.
But they're like heavy, clunky. They look like they were made by Mattel in 1985, and they had a Power Ranger come out of them. And they're all lead acid batteries, so super slow to recharge, super low discharge rate, which means you just pull the full throttle. There's only so much power that battery can give at a moment without the voltage collapsing.
200 million of these?
200 million, which is the same amount as there were cars in the whole country.
Wow.
And these things are like $300.
Wow.
So that's what got me thinking, okay, in the Western world, people think, okay, electric vehicles, they'll follow this traditional, this traditional path for automotive, something called the Hershey's Kiss business model. You can look it up, but it starts off with really high end. So Tesla was actually following the automotive playbook, right? You start with high end, handmade, super premium cars, even motorsport, like Formula One, like a lot of tech starts up there and then makes its way down through this Hershey's Kiss, through this curve. For listeners who are not familiar with the Hershey's Kiss, it's an American chocolate that's kind of shaped like it's been dropped. Well, it has been dropped from above, molten, and then lands on a plate. So it's kind of has this shape. And then as you get down in the layers, you get the Tesla S. So everything you learn, the unit economics, the production scale that you get from that next level up, gets you to the next level down. But the mission always for Tesla, at least what they said, was to get to a mass market vehicle. So something that is your Toyota Corolla. So this is kind of how we've gotten over time to the Tesla 3. So the Tesla 3 is like, I was just in Dubai, like half the taxis there are Tesla 3s.
Wow.
It's at the point or close to the point where your upfront cost is about the same, or the with the financing and so on, that you're at the point where it doesn't really make a difference anymore in terms of your initial capital outlay to go electric or not. But my thinking was this, like, so taking that, is there a way where we can go straight to something that is at that mass market? Is that really necessary to go there? Because it's all about following that traditional Hershey's Kiss model is all about getting to certain unit economics. But if we go shopping for unit economics, if we go to a market where you've got lots of people who are just cranking out the kilometers, spending a lot of money on fuel, where there is enough of them as a total addressable market and as a serviceable addressable market within a short time frame, without huge leaps and bounds in technology, like new battery chemistries or something radical like that, where we can get there with a reasonably achievable and fundable R&D program and go straight to that, then that itself becomes the thin end of the wedge for everything else.
So this is the question as you're seeing 200 million electric motorbikes, like in China, you're seeing all these patterns, you're seeing Tesla market expansion, like coming out to mass market even more. And you're asking yourself, okay, where is this going to happen next? Is that the question you're asking yourself? Or?
I think it was like, where can we go straight to a vehicle that is really a one-to-one replacement? Because the scooters and e-bikes that we saw in China, they're more of an upgrade from a bicycle. They weren't replacing a petrol motorcycle. And to the extent they were, it's because petrol motorcycles are being banned entirely. But you're replacing something that can go 100 kilometers an hour with something that can go 25 kilometers an hour.
Yeah,
it's not a replacement. It can barely go up a hill. Like you hit a parking garage ramp and you're screwed with one of these things.
You gotta carry it all up. Yeah.
So what I was thinking was, like, I guess there was another thought process going on here. It was like looking at solar PV costs and sort of cost increments, and then looking at lithium batteries. So take solar. You start off with solar as only economically viable on satellites and spacecraft. Like, it's from a decaying hunk of radioactive matter. That's what they would otherwise use for the power plant for a satellite, right? And so let's put out these sales, but I don't know what the cost per watt hour is. Thousands, millions of dollars maybe.
Yeah.
And then it sort of, but then costs come down and you're making some of these, and then it's viable for remote weather stations or pocket calculators where there's a really high value per watt hour, right? And you keep coming down on these increments, and each preceding increment builds the scale and reduces costs and finance, and also prompts research to happen in R&D that you then get to the next scale.
So you're looking at all these different solutions, and what was the moment where you're like, okay, like, let's commit to figuring this out and actually doing something here?
Yeah, I think it was I was actually I was living in Berlin at the time. So after I did my big spirit quest, as my wife's cousin, who lived in Arusha for a long time, he coined the term.
Wow.
It's stuck. So after my spirit quest, I decided it made sense to be based in Berlin, because we had been living in London up to that point. And it was just the cost of living was so high. So I was like, okay, my runway is 4x in Berlin, because and we can actually have our own apartment and not be sharing a house.
Yeah.
And I got put in touch with a friend from some guys that were running an accelerator program through Startup Bootcamp. They had a program specialized in smart transport and energy. And I told these guys about my ideas, and I had a more conservative idea as well, which was, okay, let's do solar charging stations for electric bicycles around Europe. Easily, far fewer questions around how that's going to work, but lower impact. And Alex Farset, actually, who's running the program and is still in the leadership at SBC. I was just chatting to him this morning, actually. He really gave me this sounds awesome, and gave me the feedback and the courage, as and getting that from someone who was really authoritative really pushed me to do the bigger, harder thing. and said, look, just get on a plane and get down there. So right in the middle of this accelerator program, so I did the 3-month startup bootcamp program. He said, just get on a plane, go see. Go. So I came to Nairobi, went to Arusha, and went to Kigali. And so spent about 7 or 8 days in each place, and just got out there, got talking to border riders, got to understand the unit economics, looked at the fuel prices, understood their payment terms, how much they pay for a petrol bike, and also looked at, it was made sure that bicycles weren't the best thing to go into first, and some other 3-wheelers. But yeah, really landed on, certainly validated the potential unit economics, and then looked at which country first, and then just decided Rwanda based on that. So at the time, and in general over the last 10 years, fuel prices have been higher, about 10-20% higher in Rwanda. So there's more stronger value proposition for the customers.
Why is that?
Just mainly trucking costs. So every liter of fuel that gets to Kigali, none of it comes from the region, right? So it has to be trucked across from either Dar es Salaam or Mombasa. And that's very expensive. Costs twice as much to ship a 20-foot shipping container or 40-foot shipping container. Costs twice as much to truck it from the coast as it does to get there on the boat all the way from China.
Wow.
So that's the primary reason.
So you picked Kigali because it was a place to test this out.
Yeah, so Kigali, easy to register a company. Coming here as a foreigner to Kenya or Tanzania, especially, getting a work permit, being able to register the company and get the paperwork set up, and no one's going to invest in you if you don't even have a legal entity, right? Or there's a question hanging over that.
So you said it was more difficult in Tanzania versus in Rwanda.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Can you be more specific for why?
Well, I asked around. I asked people who are also working at other startups there in Arusha, how long does it take to get a work permit? How long does it take to register a company? And they're like, it'll take 2 years. This is going back to 2014.
Okay. And so that pushed you off from
it's just not an option to start something from scratch here without external funding.
As a Tanzanian, I'm disappointed. We need to do better. So I really hope government official, as you're watching this, please make some changes so we can make sure Ampersand comes to Tanzania.
Well, this was 9 years ago, so things may be much better now.
Hopefully Ampersand in Tanzania 2024, maybe.
Let's see.
We'll see. We got to make sure that everything makes sense for their business, but I'm hopeful that we can get them over to Tanzania.
Well, Tanzania is the bigger market. It has twice as many bodabodas as Uganda, which would be our other next option after.
Who has the most bodabodas in East Africa?
Tanzania.
Okay.
About 2 million.
2 million boda. And then Kenya?
We're about 1.5 to 2 million here, but Tanzania was already at 2 million like 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay. And then Uganda would be 1.
Uganda's around 1.3.
Okay. And then Kigali,
Rwanda's small, right? So Rwanda's like 75 to 100,000, of which about 55,000 are in and around the Kigali area, which is still great. We're already at 36% gross margin, which is 1,300 bikes on the road on the core like swap energy business, and we're still making positive margins on the motorbikes. So it's great as a market, but it's not the big. Certainly not the big prize.
But it was a place you went to test this out.
It's a great proof of concept country. So some of your listeners may be familiar with zip lines. I went there for the same sort of reasons. Also, a motorcycle is a regulated product. So going into a market, going into a new jurisdiction, having fewer layers between yourself and government, just because it's a smaller country. I'm from a small country. So the debit card payment systems in shops, like that was prototyped in New Zealand by a consortium of international banks, because it's a small country. It's easier to get to someone who can actually make a decision. In the zipline case, they wanted to start off. They're from Half Moon Bay, California. They wanted to start off there, but trying to get FAA to rewrite their codes for aviation to deal with drones and the railroads in the sky concept, the pre-programmed routes and so on. Much bigger hurdle especially for who are these guys? Who's a small company versus a country like Rwanda, where it's just easier to get through those layers. And the second big thing with Rwanda is like the unit economics are just can be really, really strong. So you're it's just low hanging fruit in many ways. So for us, In Kigali, there were lots and lots of drivers, 55,000. It's half of all the road traffic in Kigali are motorbike taxis, commercial motorbikes, and they're carrying people most of the time, which means they're consuming more energy, which is good for us because we're in the energy business here. And that's also the gap between those running costs and their fuel spending is where we save drivers more money. So we'll save on average a Kigali motorbike driver about $700 a year. Right, which is life-changing. Because most of the guys are on, there's so much competition, they're on such thin margins, it usually ends up doubling their take-home income.
So you took this trip to East Africa, did all this research, and decided, okay, Rwanda is the place we're going to start in with a test pilot.
Yeah.
So what was the first thing you guys did?
So first thing we did was to work out like what kind of vehicle do people want. And I think in hindsight, like we probably over-engineered that process. I think we ended up bringing out 5 different vehicles. Three were scooters in quite different configurations. One was one of those giant gray plastic Mattel looking things. Had a big space for a battery pack under the floorboards, which was cool. One that was quite modern looking and one that was more basic. We then had 2 different conventional motorcycles, one a bit more small, and then one that looked much more standard. And it was quite a challenge to like get all these together, figure out how we're going to do the batteries and ship them out. And there's always some kind of delay. So we probably lost at least like 6 months in actually getting everything there in front of people. And it was just clear from the get-go from customers, they were only interested in a motorcycle that looked like a motorcycle. We even went through with a focus group with the customers and said, okay, if we change this about this scooter, what don't you like about it? Okay, we put post-it notes all over the vehicles of like, okay, this changed. And at the end we said, okay guys, like I want you to imagine each of these vehicles with all the changes we've discussed. How much would you pay for that vehicle? Would you want it and how much would you pay for it? And the resounding answer was, we're not interested in a scooter. Most of the guys said, even if you give the scooter to them for free, they would just give it to their wives to ride or sell it. Because it's just, there's some practical reasons and then there's some more qualitative reasons. So practical reasons, scooter's just too close to the ground. The wheels are too small. So instead of going across every pothole, you go down and up, down and up, down and up. You bounce along. All the plastics that are on scooters will just continually break. And they're against a rock or someone's going to just bounce into them. And then it's more like, this scooter thing. I don't think people will look at me and they won't think I'm a taxi. Even if we write taxi on the front, people will be like, what is that thing? I'm not going to trust it. So they really wanted something that looked as close as possible to the motorcycles that they were familiar with.
So where'd you get the first prototype for the motorcycle looking?
Well, it ended up coming from a factory in China that had made it for some other client before that ended up pulling out or walking away and weren't interested. And so we had a starting point there from that prototype, and then we worked on that and built a battery pack for it. And that's how we got our first bike on the road.
Nice. So from there to now, over 300 employees, across Rwanda, and I keep saying Tanzania because I'm hoping that they go there soon. Across Rwanda and Kenya. And, you said a couple thousand bikes, where people are using your batteries there.
Yeah, about 1,700 right now. So, yeah.
And this is across both markets?
That's across both markets.
Nice. Yeah. And then you're spending more time in Kenya. Is this going to be a bigger market for you? Are you guys going to be investing more here or? Yeah.
It's definitely a bigger market. I think, a consequence of the funding environment that we and I think everybody else out there is experiencing means that most of my time has been focused on fundraising for the past year, 18 months. And the VC ecosystem is just based here. And there is a certain amount of importance of just being on the ground, being able to have chats with people and explain, give investors comfort on where you're at. I think we were finding that kind of a lot of attention from the ecosystem here was going to some of our competitors who are at an earlier stage and were doing a good job of, better job than us on the comms game. So that was also part of the reason. But it's also, we felt it was important to have someone other than someone in the senior management team, other than our amazing Kenya country manager, Hesbon, who's also now the chair of the Electric Mobility Association of Kenya and on the government task force. But apart from Hesbon, we thought it was important for someone in senior management to be based here to really say, hey, Kenya's a very serious, important market for us. And then finally, we've seen such enthusiasm and movement from the government here in Kenya towards e-mobility in general and climate, the opportunity of climate tech and climate investment and for Kenya to become a hub for that. But in particular for bodabodas, electrifying bodabodas, that we felt it was important to also, so that I could be here to be engaged in that conversation. And
understand better. Got it. So at startups, there is no shortage of challenges. Every year, different problems, every stage of the business, different challenges. And you look back and you're like, wow, this is the biggest thing that kept me up at night, a year ago. And today, like, I would crave for those problems. Now I have different types of problems. What have been some of the more challenging moments of building Ampersand?
Look, I think COVID was tough, and it meant that we had investors. Like, we had a term sheet from an investor, and they pulled it away right away. This is just as cases we're picking up in California. I think this is March 2020.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So that was pretty brutal, and that certainly slowed down the timeline. And then came, related to COVID, also all the supply chain, like chip Armageddon and China just basically shutting down. Like, we couldn't visit our suppliers, we couldn't inspect new prototypes. It would just slow things down a lot. We were fortunate in a way that we got in and had a market ready product before COVID, and weren't, because it would have been really tough otherwise, or even worse otherwise. And that has just translated into further and further delays. The other big challenge has certainly been fundraising. I think we have. There's certainly first mover advantage.
I want to talk about the challenge during COVID.
Yeah, sure.
You like this, so much of your energy-based business runs across mobility and people moving around and be able to travel around. And you're in markets where governments are like, okay, we're going to have a lockdown. People have to stay home and so on. And you have a team where you have to pay salaries and payroll every single month. And maybe revenues aren't going to be growing for who knows how long COVID is going to be. Is it a 1 month thing? Is it a 5 month thing? Is it a 1 year thing? How are you navigating that as the CEO of the business?
Well, we were fortunate in that we had a couple of grants come in that we'd been working on for a long time. And that grant funding, I think, particularly when the environments are so tough as they are now and as they were back then in 2020, was that we had a $500K grant from USA Development and Innovation Ventures. And we also had a $500K grant from Shell Foundation. And that was really critical funding at the time. And we had been trying to raise a $4 million round. But that really kept the lights on. And it was all tranched out. So we had to keep meeting these milestones, which means that, less cash flow certainty, but at least it was there and non-dilutive at the time. I think we were fortunate in some ways in that we didn't have that many customers on the road. So there was about 12 weeks of lockdown in Rwanda. And during that time, we were able to give our customers a stipend so that they could just keep food on the table. And in the end, it didn't cost us that much, and it created a lot of loyalty among those early customers.
How do you, going from that, okay, now to these new challenges that you faced more recently, as you talked about, globally, there's this massive tech question about funding, and everybody's had to relook at, okay, what does funding look like for me or for the business, and where does this go for us in our organization? How have you navigated that as a CEO?
I think it has been really challenging. It has meant that we've had to constantly shift timelines because funding has been slow, or it's not just that it's hard to get, but it's also it takes a really long time, and that's been compounded by the fact that e-mobility is still something pretty new for most of the VC community here. Right, they're used to fintech, used to software. And the main experience they have is with solar home systems, and That has not always gone the way they would like.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of hardware is always kind of hard, I suppose, for at least traditionally. There's been a shift in the North American VC ecosystem towards e-mobility, and until there was a big boom and bust, but about I think it's about 60% of VC capital in California at one point was going into e-mobility, into companies like Tesla, of course, and others. That we're a long way. That has not yet happened out here. At the same time, another challenge has been that we've got a lot of because we own our battery fleet, and it's a very lucrative asset, but it still means we have a lot of physical assets, not only that we produce and sell, but actually sitting on our balance sheet. And the batteries take a couple of years to pay for themselves. After that, they last for another 5 years or so. But that is a challenge for a lot of investors who are used to pure software.
So talk to me about that. And like, okay, so across the continent, you've seen these challenges. Are these challenges the equivalent of how, like, as the team has so many questions, like, hey Josh, can we do this year? Can we do this next year? Can we had this plan to be in these other countries. Is this happening next month? What's going on? How are you navigating those conversations with the team and the company during this time period of trying to fundraise as well?
Yeah,
and not being sure if you're going to even get the money you're trying to fundraise.
No, and it's been a challenge. And it was something that the team came back and said, hey, we just need some clarity here. Like, where are we going? Are we, is it about expansion? Is it about R&D? It's a nice problem to have that we have so many different options for where we could go, because we really started out as a full stack. We had to be a full stack solution. We had to be a battery designer, battery manufacturer, a battery energy network operator. We had to be a motorcycle assembler and retailer, and doing a lot of the actual fabrication and manufacturing and design of the motorcycles as well. And then we were also an asset finance company in the beginning, which was something that we managed to carve off to our partners at Mcopa, Jolly Finance, Watu, Mogo, who are great. And it's a great business. It's done well. It's very profitable. But we don't also have to be a fintech company. And so let's specialize in what we do best. And we're seeing that evolution in the ecosystem. And we're seeing some companies come up who say, hey, actually they just want to make and sell motorbikes. Well, that's great. That's great for us. So they can take care of the motorbike piece and we can take care of the energy piece. And, and over time, especially as governments are saying, hey, we want all the motorbikes to go electric. We're seeing the big motorcycle OEMs now come into the frame and say, okay, we know that in order to keep selling motorbikes in this country, we've got to be part of this. And so we're seeing this, and I think it's just a natural process of specialization as we go. But that means we still have a lot of options. We could choose to just manufacture and sell batteries to third parties and not even operate the swap network. We could just be a software company if we really wanted to. So there are so many different possible futures, and so we came together. We had a retreat for a week and really looked at the big picture and aligned it with, did the whole VTO exercise, aligned it with, here's our North Star. This is the purpose of this business, and what gets us to that purpose, and then working back from that to a 7-year goals, 3-year goals. What do we need to get done in the next year, and what are we going to do this quarter? And I think that was really valuable for the team to feel like, okay, there's a very clear data-driven, well-informed trajectory. I think as well, like going to things like COP, going to getting out there a bit more is definitely helpful to feed that process, that thought process, and make sure that we're not moving in the wrong direction.
So today we do have an exclusive with Josh, because Ampersand had previously raised about $15 million, and right now they're about to announce a $20 million fundraise. How did that happen, and how are you feeling about it?
Oh, it was exhausted, I think is about right. It's really tough out there at the moment. And I think there's also, it took longer because e-mobility is new. So a lot of investors had to were very excited and interested, but really had to really understand it. And it's a process probably started a year and a half ago. So we've raised several safes that are part of this round that are now converting in this round, as well as debt. So working capital debt from Signum Capital. They have an Africa Go Green fund, which is backed by KfW, and then new equity led by our existing Series A investor, which is a climate tech, clean tech VC from California called the Ecosystem Integrity Fund. As well as several others participating. The largest being Acumen. So
wow,
big presence in East Africa, big portfolio, and a big network, tons of experience that we're really excited about bringing in as well.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Acumen and Jackie Novakratz and the work that they're trying to do. So
and she's just a great advocate for the ecosystem as a whole. Like, she's got so many great, such a strong network and so many platforms that she speaks on and is able to sing the virtues of the sector here.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. That's huge to be closing a round of funding right now. And I'm sure you and the team have a lot of big plans for the upcoming year for where you guys want to be.
Yeah, we're super appreciative. I especially given, I know how tough it is out there. I was at AFSIC in London a few weeks back, Africa Investment Conference there. And the fact that we were moving towards close on a funding round that wasn't a down round, was definitely drew a lot of surprise. So definitely really appreciative to be closing. It's been tough because we have to keep changing plans and timelines. So the goalposts are always shifting, but no, we're excited. So this will get us a lot of growth in the coming year. So it's great to not just be standing still, but actually growing volumes.
Yeah.
We're looking at 2 to 3x just from this round, and then continuing to grow even beyond that. But there's also a lot of focus still on R&D. I think there's it's an exciting moment in a way that we've really proven that we can produce at a moderate, medium level of scale, so in the thousands of motorcycles and batteries. A motorcycle energies package that is just cheaper and better from day one. Like, you don't have to have a big upfront investment from the customer. They can just roll in, they get a motorbike that costs less to buy, even less to finance than a petrol bike.
Yeah.
And it's more reliable, has more power. You're not compromising on power. You have a swap experience that takes the same amount of time as refueling, so you don't have the problems of charging. So it's like if you go back to 1915.
Yeah.
This is like the Ford Model T, if you like.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a lot better than a horse and cart. Maybe it's even before the Ford Model T. I don't know, like the really early cars.
Yeah.
Better than a horse and cart for sure. But there's still so much room for improvement, so much room for growth. There's still our petrol motorbike looks kind of like, our electric motorbike looks kind of like a petrol motorbike, just as the first cars look like strange retrofitted horse carts, right? There's still so much upside on the technology side. And that's why we really still think of ourselves very much as a tech company, not just as not merely an energy company. It's definitely not like just now rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
There's still so much opportunity, and so much opportunity for the sector as a whole as companies continue to specialize and create value for both on the R&D side as well as just manufacturing and capital equipment. Relatively modest investments in capex can still produce big returns for savings for the customer and unit economics.
If you look at regions, let's say across Africa or maybe even across the world, like in Africa, let's say in Nigeria, you have a large motorcycle population. Massive.
Yeah, massive. Biggest in Africa.
And you look at Southeast Asia, for example, you have a huge motorcycle population. Are there any plans for you guys, first, like within Africa? And then the second question is there a reason why you guys didn't go to Southeast Asia yet?
Well, for Southeast Asia, at the time of starting the company, it really seemed like, okay, there are a lot of very smart e-mobility, electric vehicle engineers in China already, in Southeast Asia, who are already there and on the ground and know the market, know that ecosystem. So part of it was definitely looking at, I think it was also just serendipity. Like, everything fell into place. We knew we could make money here in Africa. we could save customers money in Africa. So it's just the first place where all the pieces fell of the puzzle fell into place. It was a combination of those two reasons. And then as we look across the continent, certainly East Africa, the cost of fuel tends to be higher than in West Africa, and we're still competing, and that's the whole point, is that we're cheaper than a fuel-powered motorcycle, and so East Africa is still the sweet spot. When we map out the whole continent, we look at how much margin could we earn and how much can we save customers? And the quadrant where that number is the highest and where the volume is the highest, so where there's the most, just a total addressable market, is the largest. That most of those countries, most of that cluster is in East Africa. Nigeria is the largest market in Africa, but fuel until recently has been subsidized. It's still pretty cheap. It's about 93 cents US a liter, so about 750 naira. So we could make money and save customers there, but then comes the next challenge. We can just kind of break even.
Just for context, what's the price per liter in Kenya versus Rwanda versus Nigeria?
It's about $1. It fluctuates, right? Yeah. And currencies go up and go down, and they've been going down a bit, but about $1.30, $1.35 a litre is kind of where we've sat for most of the past couple of years.
Okay, and then versus Nigeria was
93 cents, and it was like around 40 cents. And you know, our listeners in Nigeria will feel like, 93 cents is really expensive, but that's because it was much cheaper before, right? Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got the challenge of the grid. So in Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, there's actually a surplus of grid generation capacity. There's more power. And so we have and that's actually a great thing that we absorb that surplus capacity, because ultimately utilities and ultimately governments have to pay for that power whether or not it gets used. It's called a take or pay power purchase agreement. And it makes sense if you're building hydro or wind or solar. There's no marginal cost to produce more or less energy. It's not like at least I'm saving money on coal or oil or gas, right? Yeah. So that's why those contracts are like that. So we model it out. We'd save something like $300 million, utilize something like $300 million of electricity if you price it, if you assume it's like an 18 cents a kilowatt hour cost. And, here in Kenya, on top of saving all of that, about $1 billion a year in Kenya on fuel that has to get imported otherwise.
Wow. Wait, so you said that's what you've done so far, or would save?
Would save. Okay, would save. So if we made every boda in Kenya electric, assuming around $1 million, conservatively, $1 million, and it's probably more, probably much more, we'd save about that much in fuel every year.
Wow.
And so it's a huge driver. Like Forex is a massive concern for most countries across the continent. So anyway, back to Nigeria, the other challenge is availability of electricity and reliability of electricity. So in some contexts, we can do it. We can do a lot with solar, and that's great, of course, because it's entirely renewable. But actually, if we assume the similar sort of infrastructure to current fuel stations, there's just not enough space above, even if you build a structure across the entire footprint of a fuel station and cover it in solar panels. That only gets you so far. It's not to actually electrify the whole Okada population in Nigeria. You'd need to have like adjacent roof space, about 900 square meters for each station. So there's a big practical concern, and that's a lot more capex. And someone else has to cover that capex, because we already have the challenge of having those batteries on our balance sheet. So to add all the capex for solar on top of that is another big chunk.
What is the end goal for Ampersand for you?
I mean, it definitely focuses very much on Africa, and we have a lot of value to add. As it turns out, across the global south and even beyond. But electrifying bodabodas and eventually other light vehicle forms in Africa is the goal for us. So we'd love to see every motorcycle on the continent electric by 2030. We don't presume that we'll be be presumptuous to say we're gonna do all of that. That's a heck of a lot, and it's important that there's choice for customers, and there are different shoes that fit different feet, right? Different applications, different types of drivers, different budgets, different geographies will want different solutions. You have West Africa, you have a lot of the more Asian style underbone motorcycle, the ones that look kind of like halfway between a scooter and a motorbike. I think it's healthy that there's competition. I think for us, the long-term vision is still very much focused on climate change and about making a big dent in that. So within sub-Saharan Africa, we know that we can save with our current technology prices, current battery prices, which are now starting to have returned to their historical trend of trending downwards in price. We can already serve about half of all the motorbikes in Africa today.
So the addressable market, so the big picture goal would be by 2030.
By 2030, we'd love to see every motorcycle on the continent electric. Now, maybe that's 2033. Like it's ambitious, right?
Yeah.
But we know that we could achieve that for really less than just 1 year's spending by that market currently on fuel and oil, especially within the 9.6 million motorbikes. It's about half of all the motorbikes on the continent that are in countries where we can already save customers at least 15% of their operating costs and still earn a 20% margin for the business. I mean, it's only we move that around, but that was kind of the semi-arbitrary, like thumb on the wind benchmark that we set for how do we define our serviceable addressable market.
Yeah.
And so we think that's entirely doable. And on the one hand, although we have to build these batteries and they cost money and they sit on our balance sheet, we can still get that job done for like less than just 1 year's fuel spend by that market. So that's about $13 billion a year is spent by that market on fuel and oil changes.
One of the questions that one of my friends used to work at Mcopa and was quite senior there. And one of the challenges they faced was when people would just order all these way cheaper solar panels from China and service it at 30% cheaper than they were getting it at. And it was really frustrating for them. Obviously, maybe some of them might be poorer quality and maybe not keeping as good retention later, like maybe they last a shorter time period and so on, and not much services locally or operational support locally in each market. Is that something you think about? Is that something you fear? Is that something that you are concerned by?
Look, I think we've seen it. We've seen already. Like I think a lot of the other companies that have come after us, I think maybe they've had investors. They didn't have enough, weren't able to have technical enough staff, or they didn't have investors that were, really serious about the tech and understanding and not putting a product on the market that prematurely. And so they went to China, got what they could get off the shelf, and then the results have really not met the market requirements, not met product requirements. Because you're asking someone to shift from a pretty mature product, right? From motorcycles, they're not. They're essentially the technology is largely unchanged since the 1970s in the petrol motorbikes you see on the roads in East Africa. Asking them to shift to something much, much cheaper. And look at the brands on those motorbikes. They're not, for the most part, at least in Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, they're not like the cheapest options possible. They're not these no-name brands. They're Bajaj and TVS, and those motorcycles are sold at a premium, and customers understand that when they buy that motorcycle, it's going to last longer, it's going to be more reliable, and there's going to be a whole range of different spare parts available for that vehicle as well. And so we're not in a lowest common denominator market. I think, and that's because it's a B2B market. So unlike solar home systems, our customers make money, cash money, hour by hour from the product, right? And they make a lot more money. So when we make a lot more money per customer as well, because they're spending about $100 a month on just the battery swaps alone, aside from the spares and the cost of the motorcycle. Whereas a solar home system company typically makes less than $5 a month, and their customers for solar home systems, they're relying on other forms of income to pay to actually generate cash.
Yep.
Often it's waiting for harvest to come in so they can sell some surplus. So it's a lot easier for us. The other thing is we see our customers 3 times a day. Right. So any issues, any problems with the product, we see them, and also if the customer doesn't pay, the vehicle doesn't actually go anywhere. So we actually work with Mcopa and other companies who provide cheaper credit to our customers because they have this mechanism to actually say, look, if the driver hasn't paid, it's a pay-as-you-go motocycle. You can't do that with a petrol motorbike, right? So someone can theoretically get a motorbike and take off into the distance, and the bike ends up in Congo or something, right? Because you can buy fuel everywhere.
Josh, the African region is a very fast-growing one. You have 54 countries, depending on who you ask, and 54 different central banks, and you were going from 1.4 billion to 2.5 billion within the next 27 years as a region. What feedback or thoughts would you have for climate tech investors out there in the world watching this right now about the region?
Well, I think it's that there's only 3% of climate capital flows to Africa right now. This was a report that Kawisafi Ventures shared just in the past week. And I think what we've shown is that there are really low-hanging fruit opportunities on the continent. Also, valuations tend to be a lot lower out here as well. Like for instance, we've put electric vehicles on the road that are fitting in a genuinely mass market segment. So they're not just consumer vehicles for wealthy people or in a very specialized niche, but that represent half of all the road traffic on the continent. And we're already at 36% gross margin with just 1,300. We hit that 2 quarters ago with just 1,300 motorbikes on the road in Rwanda. If we compare to much larger, more well-known e-mobility startups that have got valuations, raised amounts of money far more than anything we're even remotely approaching. But if you look at the unit economics of where they are, look at some of the stand-up scooter, kick scooter startups. Bird is unfortunately not doing so well right now. And others, like there are fantastic deals here, and there are fantastic opportunities that actually have applications also far beyond the continent as well. Like we look at our battery packs now as the best, the lowest cost per kilometer, the most reliability for these 100, 150cc motorbikes that make up 80% of all motorcycles in the world, particularly in these commercial applications. And that has value far beyond the continent as well. So I think that's what I would say if you're sitting in Silicon Valley and you want to do climate tech, and yes, you should. I think there's been so much attention in North America because of CHIPS Bill and IRA, as well as that's also drawn a lot of venture capital interest, such as it still remains, into that's focused on e-mobility into the domestic market first. So we are competing a bit on an unlevel playing field, but I think we've shown that it's worth taking a look towards Africa.
Nice. So Josh, I have a 2-part question. If you were to start all over again, what would you do differently? And I guess tied with that, what advice would you have for somebody who's starting or like looking at getting into your industry?
Look, I would say I wish I had kind of taken a leap sooner. I feel like in the very beginning, and because I came from a legal background, I was very, very analytical, and I really wanted to answer every question. And so I would get talking to people like back in 2014 when I just had the beginnings of this idea, and people would keep asking me questions, and I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll go away and write that question down. And I would really try to answer every possible question. But actually, like, I think they should have taken the leap sooner to actually go out and try to win over some co-founders. Because I think what happens is 98% of people will just think of all the reasons why you can't. But then there'll be like 2 people who will say, that's awesome. I know you don't need to have all the answers. There's enough there. Let's get in and do this, and work through that process. Obviously you have to work out if the chemistry makes sense, and if they if they're bringing real skills that you don't have into the mix. I think my advice for anyone who's interested in doing something like this, what really propelled me along this path was like looking at the unit economics. So look at where are things that are currently powered by fuel or in some other unsustainable way, because it helps to be working towards continued planetary habitability. So if you're keen on climate change, and that generally means look at what's happening with battery prices, look at what's happening with solar panels, and what and the electrification of everything, and what the IoT of everything also brings to the equation. And so look at conventional types of vehicle or other energy applications that didn't make sense yet last year, 5 years ago to electrify, but actually, now the math makes sense. And we're seeing this trend now really kicking in again with lithium battery prices coming down. So what didn't make sense yesterday makes sense today, and what doesn't make sense yet today is probably going to make sense tomorrow. And so I would look at that and start studying those unit economics, and look close to home. Look at what you already know or you're familiar with, and look at where there's a lot of people using that energy system.
Mm-hmm. Are you cool if they reach out to you for some advice?
Sure. Yeah.
After the fundraising and everything like that, and whenever he has some tiny free time, he'll be able to reach. Yeah. On the personal side, what matters to you most in life and why? Boy,
that's a tough one. Look, I've got a family, and yeah, I think that comes first. But I do care very passionately about our business and what we've built and the potential it has to really improve lives. I think on a long-term level, it's very much about climate change. Continued planetary habitability. Like, dear listener, if you're listening for a cause, like making sure that the planet continues to be habitable and avoiding the horrible impact of climate change on everybody, on real people, especially the most vulnerable, should be motivation enough, right? I think it's a big motivator as well for my team. And on the flip side, the impact, the positive impact we've had on people's lives is pretty dramatic. We had a funny situation recently, and so we gather like 50 data points every 5 seconds from our batteries, and one of the reasons we do that is for the planning of our swap station network. And so we very carefully use our own data. We also use data from trackers on petrol motorcycles to make sure there wasn't a mismatch, in order to plan the locations and then how many batteries we're going to put in a station. And we were having a problem though. We were noticing that a lot of the swapping stations were overburdened. We had, particularly at certain times of day, we had all these stations that were maxed out. They would just, people come in, there wasn't available battery. We're like, okay, and so we thought, oh my gosh, like we've made some terrible mistake. Like, there's something wrong in our data set or the way we're calculating it. And so anyway, we started digging in deeper and looking at the individual riders who were doing this the most, because we were able to look at that level. And then we call up the customers and say, hey, what's going on? We're noticing this difference from your previous driving patterns. And the answer kept coming back to us is like, they've saved so much money by riding an Ampersand motorcycle that they've bought land outside of town, bought a shamba, put a house on it, moved the family in from out country. It's got a mabati roof, it's got a cement floor, and there's outbuildings, and we go to these customers' homes and like, and these are the chickens, and here are the kids lined up in their school uniforms going to a private school. That's the outbuilding. I've just bought my neighbor's house over the fence there, and I'm renting it out. Like, it's epic to see like what $700 over 4 years, because we sold our first motorcycles 4 years ago. What that translates to, and it's pretty humbling.
Yeah.
It definitely feels quite confronting to be faced with that. And we want to see that for
many more people.
Many more people. I mean, there's 22 million boda riders in Africa. Like, wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people, and the knock-on benefits for that,
and it's only going to be a growing number. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have 2.5 billion people on this continent in 27 years.
Yeah.
How out of 9 billion total world population, like how Africa moves matters. Like there is no way also that we're staying, if we don't figure this out, there is no way that the world is staying under 2 degrees of warming.
Yeah.
Or, let alone 1.5.
Yeah.
And I think most of the climate change conversation focuses on the big emission sources now rather than looking ahead to what's coming down the line.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got a quick fire round for you as we wrap up over here. So if you had an autobiography one day written about you, what do you think the title would be?
Please don't write this autobiography. It's too embarrassing.
Well, that's fair.
I think I think there's a bit of a characteristic of New Zealanders is that we find praise incredibly awkward. And I think we're modest to a fault, so I think I would hate somebody writing an autobiography.
Yeah. Unless it comes to rugby, right? That's a different story.
All Blacks are different.
If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Oh gosh. I think flying would be pretty cool. That's just for myself. Flying.
And if you had a 25th hour to the day, what would you spend it doing?
Oh, just hanging out with my son, I think.
Yeah? I'm one son right now?
Yeah, he's I have one child, 2 years, 3 months old. So it's a very fun time.
Oh, nice.
And I'm on the road too much and working too late in the evening. So
yeah. An important one, do you like sports?
I do, yeah.
What sports do you follow the most?
Lately I've been very into tennis.
Okay.
And the Rugby World Cup, of course, that's
tough one there.
Mandatory. Well, not quite so happy with the result, but it was a fantastic tournament. I mean, it's so many, like, I guess 5 different countries that had a real,
chance of winning.
Any of them could have won and it wouldn't have been a weird outcome.
Yeah. Do you watch football?
I do not generally watch football, I'm afraid.
Okay, just checking because the
but
question.
If I did, I'd have to support Arsenal since.
Man,
since that's the Rwanda team.
Yeah. There you go. Visit Rwanda, right?
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our interview with Josh. Here, originally all the way from New Zealand, spent some time in the UK, became a lawyer, moved to China. Speaks Chinese, as you've learned today on this call, moved back to the UK, then moved to Berlin, got as part of Startup Bootcamp, spent some time looking at where to build the company while spending time in Eastern Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, and decided to kick off in Rwanda. And now today they've expanded to Kenya. And the impact they're looking to create is incredible. You've got 22 million boda drivers across the African continent today. As the continent grows, it's going to be even more massive, and the impact you can create by just saving, let's say in Kenya alone, is over $1 billion. And so well done to you and the entire team for the work that you are doing. I know it's definitely not easy. I know with growth comes a lot more challenges. So I'm excited for this upcoming year for you, and congratulations to you and the team.
Thanks so much, Benjamin. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Josh. Cheers, and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.